Hi, today we're going to talk about how I'm changing seasons, and I'm still implementing more layers of permaculture techniques in my garden, trying to improve the soil, trying to decide which crops to put in, trying to make decisions on, when things should come out, because when you put something in, especially in permaculture, there's usually multiple purposes, multiple things you're trying to do with each plant that you plant in your garden. And so sometimes you got to make that decision to just pull them. And unfortunately, that's what I've had to do. Let's take a look. So I started seeing where my sweet potatoes were starting to show signs of dying back. And even though I knew they probably needed a couple more weeks, and I actually saw that, you'll see that later on, where the sweet potatoes didn't quite have enough time to develop, I knew I needed to get all of these out of the ground because I needed to be able to plant my plants that I want for this kind of fall winter season before first frost. And that was coming up quickly. So I just went to town hacking at them, trying to get all of this wonderful greenery that has helped me keep the soil moisture and keep things shaded. And so once I got it all chopped down, then here I was digging around in the dirt trying to follow those main stems down to where the sweet potatoes were and trying not to damage the sweet potatoes along the way. It took a little bit, and at some point in here, I actually took a little bit of a fall while I was wrestling with one of them. But overall, I had, enough for maybe a meal or two with the sweet potatoes that I got. So like I said, I didn't get a whole lot, but part of that is because I just didn't give them enough time to develop. I think if I had given them another week or two, they would have been bigger. The roots were still this really pretty purple, and I did get some decent size ones right there that I just put on this little planter bottom. But overall, I'm learning. I've never grown sweet potatoes before, so it's still good. Now I decided to try a new way. It's not new, but it's new to me. A new way to try and get these seeds started that I wanted to plant. And I saw this video on using egg cartons. And I've used egg cartons before, and I've used other stuff like that where you start it in there and then the egg carton or whatever just kind of disintegrates around, or it just doesn't really impede the roots, right? So I thought I would try that and see how it turns out. So I poked the holes in them, and then as I was looking at it, I think I did it a couple ways that way from the outside in. I realized that it's the carton where you've pushed in is actually going up and in, so it could actually cause some interference. I'm not really sure whether it will or not. I mean, the carton might just fall apart and not be any hindrance at all, but we'll see. So in this first one, once I finally get it all packed down and in, I planted my fava beans. So I did fava beans two different ways. I did it this way in a carton, but then you'll see later that I also put it in my broadcast mix. I know this might not be the right time for carrots, but I read that a local gardener actually is very successful with planting carrots right now. And so I thought I would try it. So I'm actually planting them two different ways. Again, just testing out, seeing what'll work. You never know, and you might as well, as kind of how I look at it. So I packed up 2 cartons of eggs, so I just saved my cartons. I make sure I'm trying to save the ones that are biodegradable. Some of them are like now with the waxy paper, like that first one. And then, as you can see, I got kind of tired of trying to fill this little soil thing, the little spots. So I was trying different ways to fill them up faster. I don't know. Hopefully it works better for you if you decide to try it. Another cover crop that I planted is buckwheat. And this one is supposed to be a nitrogen fixer. Again, I haven't used any of these cover crops, but I've heard over and over that they are wonderful. So I'm going to try them out. I need the nitrogen fixing. The soil that I'm using is just to get them going, but what I'm really trying to do is give the soil that's there in my yard a jump start. So as you can see, as long as they fit, I do keep my seeds in a recipe box. Now, some of the packets you've seen are actually way larger, and those obviously don't fit. So I do have another box that's up on a shelf that I put those packets in. Those are usually stuff I plan to use pretty quickly. So try to stay a little bit organized. I'm not going to say I'm perfect though. So even though you saw me put those cover crop seeds away or plant them, I still had lots left over. I had bought a few packets of each, knowing that I was going to do more of a broadcasting method. And so right now I'm just pulling them all out. I think I even ended up with like samples from one of the classes that I went to. So I literally had a whole bunch. Like all of these packets right here are all going to go into this bucket. I want to talk a little bit about sources. So you can see these are from Botanical Interests, something like that. And the ones that I had in the recipe box, some of them were from like Home Depot. And there was another one, I was in a subscription that was more like organic seeds. And that was pretty expensive. So I stayed on it for a while, and then I was like, okay, I think I'm done paying for this kind of thing. Not that it's not valuable, but it was more than what I wanted to be putting into it. And I wasn't really having time at that particular time to actually get them planted. So they were just getting stored. And the longer you store your seeds, they can actually lose their ability to be able to be productive, right? They might not sprout for you. So be careful of that. Now, the next thing that I'm going to add after I get all of these seeds in there is the inoculant to help these seeds be able to fix nitrogen, because that bacteria is more than likely long dead and gone from my soil. So you have to add it back in. So some people call it just making sure to add that dust in. It's actually technically called an inoculant because you're putting a bacteria in. But this packet right here, that's exactly what I'm doing. And I just had some decorative spoons that I figured would be good for this task. Another nitrogen fixer is clover. And I believe red clover is what's highly recommended all over the place. But what I actually bought was a trio. I have clover that naturally grows in my front little patio garden, but that doesn't translate to my larger area where I grow things. So I have to add that in. What I'm hoping is this isn't just a cover crop that will stay for like this season. I'm hoping I can put it all over. I might even buy more and just spread it everywhere because I love clover and it's helping the soil. It's going to help keep the soil moist. It will probably last through the spring. It doesn't actually ever last through the summer unless it's in the shade. So again, it might continue if it's underneath stuff, but it's not going to ever just stay there on its own. I hope walking through all of this was helpful for you. I really am trying to show that kind of the behind the scenes, not just like, instantly it's there and I just tell you that I did it. I want you to really see the process that I go through and how I'm storing my seeds, what all the ingredients are that's going into my potting soil as opposed to the dirt that doesn't have anything that's on the ground, and how I'm using that to really just kind of jumpstart the process, start the soil rebuilding process. It needs something to help it out. The nutrients, the minerals, all of those things need to somehow get back in there, and this will help it not take as long. You could still grow in the ground. Some stuff will survive and you can rebuild slowly over time. That's not out of the question. Some stuff doesn't care what kind of soil it grows in. But what I want to try and do is be intentional about putting nutrients back in the soil, using plants to help me do that. But for what I can do, I want to also use these other tools that help regenerate the soil, because regenerative is so much better than just organic, right? I can grow organic and not put pesticides all day long, but that doesn't really help if I'm not helping that soil recuperate and be able to put nutrients back into the food. So just because you buy organic, and I'm not trying to discourage you to, does not mean it's grown in a way that it can revive and replenish the nutrients so that your food can actually have some value besides just carbs. So I hope this is helpful. I hope that you can take some of this information. If you have any comments or questions, I'd love to hear them down in the comments. And as always, happy growing.